Hello and welcome to Module 1. This is the part of the session where we're going to deep dive into critical writing. We're going to think about what it actually is, come to a common definition around it, and we're also going to talk about why it's so crucially important. And then in Module 2, we're actually going to go into the meal plan and how to support critical writing across the disciplines. So our Aledo ISD focus document states pretty clearly that part of our problem of practice is that students are not demonstrating proficiency in critical writing across the content areas. But in order for us to do that, we actually have to figure out what exactly critical writing is. Is all writing critical writing? It is not. Sometimes it's called academic writing, and our definition that we're going to be using for this session is actually writing that involves considering evidence to make reasoned conclusions. When writing critically, students evaluate and analyze information from multiple sources to convey new understanding. And this is really key because this means that when they're free writing, great things come out of free writing. But when they're free writing and they're sharing their own experiences, or when they're creative writing, these are great tasks. But it's not critical writing because they're not having to synthesize or apply what they've just learned from you. They're not having to put together expertise from more than one source and synthesize it to convey their new understanding in their writing. And therefore, it is more descriptive than critical. So if we're really looking at the difference between descriptive and critical writing, I want you to look at this. There's a time and a place for descriptive writing. It's factual. It lists details. It provides information for the reader: who, what, when, where. The process is different because they're trying to share with you what they know, right? Maybe even what they've just learned. But in order for it to be critical, which is more rigorous, they must evaluate and appraise evidence, right? They have to consider alternative points of view. They have to make connections or links between materials. So why do we practice critical writing? Because if you look at the so why, critical or academic writing is more rigorous. It causes students to grapple with multiple sources and points of view, talk about that productive struggle we look for in instructional rounds. And this contrasts with merely describing their understanding of a subject, or worse, regurgitating what you or their parents have shared with them. We want to up the game. We want them to think critically, and we want evidence of their critical thinking in their writing. So even if you don't teach ELAR, I wanted you to know what student expectations are surrounding critical writing for our students as they progress through the grade levels, right? There are primarily two genres of writing in which we ask students to write critically. One is informational, the other is argumentative. At junior and senior year, we also have them write analytically, which typically falls under one of these two categories as well. In the informational genre, they have a main or central idea that they call a thesis. In argumentative, they still have a main or central idea. We call it a claim. Both genres require evidence, right, to support that main idea. And then as their writing gets more sophisticated, in the informational genre, we ask them at junior and senior level to add in their commentary, right, that is informed from expertise and from research, or to summarize their stance that's based on their new understanding after they've explored multiple resources, right? In the argumentative genre, as they get older into high school, they start examining counter arguments. And as they get even older, before they leave us, we ask them to examine counter arguments so closely that they can either concede a point to the opposing point of view or refute it. And then I added inquiry and research standards here for you because I think it's important that all of us understand that our new standards actually require students to gather relevant information from a variety of sources from a very early age, starting in early elementary. And then as they get a little older, they start synthesizing their findings, their curated information, and they have to present that information. When they write using other people's ideas, they have to present it ethically, right, and cite their sources. So here's where we're going to go really deep. And if you want to pause and go get yourself your favorite soda, that is totally great because we're going to enter into some theory. And the reason why I think this is crucial is because if we're going to ask you to support students' elaborate practice of writing critically, thinking critically, academic discussion, and writing critically, then I want to make sure that you have a good understanding of why it is so crucial before you're just checking it off the compliance box. So this is just for laughs and giggles, but you've probably spent enough time with teenagers to know that everybody's an expert, right? Depending on which Instagram influencers they follow, if there's a meme that seems particularly credible, that might hold just as much weight to them as a peer-reviewed research article from someone who has been studying that content for 30 years. And this is the society that we live in. I mean, it doesn't take you 2 seconds on social media to see that many people consider themselves experts, and many people easily eschew the opinion of experts pretty quickly these days. The good news is that we're the cure. We are educators. We actually can give them the tools to not only think critically and discuss things critically, but to write critically, to substantiate claims with expertise. I'm really obsessed with this book by Tom Nichols called The Death of Expertise. And it's an interesting statement on on this societal ill. And this quote that I've included here captures something we see pretty regularly these days, where we're in this vicious loop and people who don't know that much about a subject, they don't know when they're over their head talking with they don't know when they're in over their head talking with an expert on the subject, right? This happens all the time. An argument ensues. People who have no idea how to make a logical argument cannot realize when they're failing to make a logical argument. That's logic for you, right? In short order, the expert gets frustrated, the layperson's insulted, everyone walks away angry. And I'm hoping that I'm not bringing up any PTSD over a recent Thanksgiving dinner you might have had, but this is actually something that we are seeing more and more regularly as people look for confirmation bias in their echo chambers, rather than being sure to listen to experts from both sides and to reason through subtle differences and complex differences in opposing viewpoints. This is where we enter the work of Kenneth Burke. And if you're not familiar with Kenneth Burke, he was a literary theorist. He passed away in 1993, but his work continues to inform freshman level college courses, especially writing courses, to this day. He is the one who came up with this, what they call a parlor metaphor. We don't use that phrase very often anymore, but think of a dinner party or a cocktail party where there's a real meeting of the minds. And so I know there are a lot of words on these next few slides. Forgive me. I wanted you to have the entire metaphor at your disposal while we were really imagining it, because Dr. Burke's work, highly influential. So we're going to imagine that we have arrived late to this parlor party or dinner party. When we arrive, others have been there for a long time. They're already involved in a heated discussion. They're too heated to stop and catch you up. And as a matter of fact, the discussion existed before they arrived. So no one in the discussion could accurately retrace all of the steps in order to catch you up. But the discussion continues. You listen for a while until you decide that you understand the tenor of the argument and you interject. Someone answers, you respond, another comes to your defense, still another aligns himself against you to either the embarrassment or the gratification of your opponent, depending on the quality of your ally's assistance. The discussion continues. Eventually, the hour grows late and you must depart. Even as you leave, the discussion is still vigorously in progress. So what does this have to do with our instruction? It's really about understanding our role and the student's role in an ongoing discussion about the content that we teach. And so, as you are well aware, each essential concept or process that we're teaching in our classroom existed long before our current students showed up to study with us. And most of them existed before we even began teaching. Our contributions are part of an ongoing discussion, if you will, that will continue long after our students graduate and we leave the profession. And so it's really important, it's humbling even, to understand that in order to be a lifelong learner, we really have to understand the conversation that happened prior to our arrival in this context. So what I need you to do now is exit this video, and the next link is actually going to take you to a video where Dr. J.D. Issa, he teaches out in commerce at Texas A&M, and he's going to break down Burke's parlor metaphor a little into a more practical chunk, right? So that we can take that metaphor and we can actually apply it to the writing that we have our students do in their classes. Thank you.